Hey everyone, just doing a video today on using hyperbolas in the graphing project, and this will be talking about skewed hyperbolas as well, so we'll go and get started. So first off, we have two different types of equations. We've talked about this in another video, but we have the x minus h squared over a squared plus the y minus k squared over b squared, where one of those is negative, right? And then you can adjust your C in the middle for rotating those. So that's what I have right now. The other version is where you have more of this ellipse form, but then the C becomes greater than 2 or less than negative 2. And so we'll take a look at that as well. For this first one, you can just model something where it's kind of close to vertical, I would say, or horizontal, right? So your tipping, right, can go sort of one way or the other, but it does get limited because one of these will tend to be somewhat horizontal or somewhat vertical through that rotation. So this might be good format for, say, this part of the mouth right here. If I wanted to go down, right, I can adjust that A and B value, where this is going to be more, make that wider and make that A narrower. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. So we're going for, right, where this is, it's going to kind of curve down here a ways, right? So I'm going to say, let's make that A much bigger, right? And then we'll also make the B bigger to bring it down, and we may have to shift up or down a bit for some of this, but this is kind of the idea, right? Making that A larger, narrower to bring that in or out, and then making the B larger, less to bring that up and down for those guys. And part of this is, right, you're kind of always getting a ratio between those two, so they do kind of interact with each other. So this might be one thing that you would try, right? Bring that A in just a little bit more. Is I could go, say, from that edge of the tongue up here to this part just to model the edge of that mouth, right around in there. So we've done the mouth with a couple of different curves already, but this would be another option, and you can kind of play around with it to see which one you might like. So there may be some curves, right, that are sort of that U-ish shape. Maybe they get flatter as time goes on, but that you can model with hyperbolas. So that would be one of those. The other type would be one that's over here, maybe like around these this whisker area, these kind of V shapes, right? Some of these have a more rounded edge than a pointed edge, and those we might be able to do also with hyperbolas. So I'm going to try to bring this over here, right? And we'll try rotating it a little bit. This is kind of a little bit sharper point, so we might bring that A and B value closer to 0, gets those closer to that point right there. And then I could try rotating it, right? So rotating it around. The problem I think I'm going to have is that this top edge will rotate more than the right edge, or this bottom edge right here. So although we can rotate it, right, so I'm starting here, and it is rotating to the left, this kind of right side of that blue hyperbola is just not rotating enough to get it where I need to. So it is coming around, but not quite enough. So the other way to try to adjust for that is, rather than using this format of equation, right, kind of that standard hyperbola format, we're going to use one of these guys up here. So I'm going to hide those and switch to this guy. Right, so right now it looks like an ellipse, right? So this is kind of our ellipse equation, and then the ellipse equation again with the -1. But as that C goes past 2, right, those become hyperbolas, and also as it goes past -2, hyperbolas in this direction. So I'm going to maybe try to adjust things that way. So let's go ahead and bring our A, say, out more this way. around that 0.7 range looks pretty good, and then the B's as well. I think we'll need to adjust those, bring those up or down. Looks like around, I don't know, maybe 0.9-ish might be okay, somewhere in that vicinity. And then we can start adjusting, right, the C value to make this either wider, right, closer in, or skinnier as we go out toward that value of 2, right? So around 2.04, this is a really narrow one, and we can get even closer in, right, kind of this way. So I'll say about negative 2.2-ish, 2.23, somewhere around there, right? Let's see, what else might I want to try? So this is around, let's modify that H and K a bit. So we can also try on this one, right, maybe tipping it a little bit more, maybe 0.8, something like that. You can also try adjusting your end value, right? So instead of this -1, maybe I want to make that like -2, right? We'll take that out. Or even if you want it sharper, you could do like a 0.5. That'll bring that closer to that center point that's right there. So you can also adjust that sort of thing in there. So it looks like we're getting somewhat close. I might just need to adjust that A and B value a little bit more, maybe even the C that's right here, to get that a little bit closer in. So I'm going to say this is probably a little too skinny. We'll go out maybe -0.8, something like this. That's getting a lot better. So we can adjust our A. Maybe go a little further here. Drag that more to the right, and that's starting to get pretty close. I would say right in there, maybe instead of 0.8, we'll make that 0.7. And then adjust it down a bit. So like right in there is looking fairly good for that guy. So you can copy down your values, right, restrict it a little bit. So I might do that, and we'll come back and make some restrictions on those guys. Alright, so I have my values set over here, this equation with the purple line, and what I can do now, I can go ahead and hide that one, is go ahead and try to make a restriction. So one thing with inequalities, I will mention this as well, so we're going to need the black line as well as shading. So I might do actually 2 different versions of this. Copy, don't do that. And then paste. So I'm going to need 2 different versions, one for just the line and then one for shading. For shading, I will go ahead and give you kind of a preview. If you use less than or equal, right, you can shade kind of inside that hyperbola, or sometimes it's outside, and depends on the direction. But one is always inside, one is outside. So if this isn't the direction I want to shade the other direction, then I can always change that to greater than or equals, and now it's going to shade outside that hyperbola. So I would also want to throw in a few more restrictions so it doesn't just go everywhere, but that is one way that you can shade with these hyperbolas, inside and out, is just to throw in the less than or equals or greater than or equals, depending on which side you want filled in and which side you don't. So I'll go and leave that kind of hidden for now. Let's go and work on this line, making that more restrictive. So I'm going to throw in right here another line. I'll say y is negative 0.5x, that's going down, and then I want that moved up a bit, so maybe like a +1 on the outside. And again, these are values you can tweak and modify as you need. So we're wanting to kind of run it right there through that guy. So I'm going to maybe bump up that slope a little bit. Instead of 0.5, we'll say maybe 0.6. That's looking pretty good. Maybe even 0.65. And then we'll bring it down just a little bit, 0.8 instead of 1, and maybe just a little bit more, maybe 0.75, something like that. So that's looking pretty good to me. We'll go ahead and stop there, and I'll probably also use this for some of the shading bits as well. So let's see, we'll say this is, so throw in, do that like almost every other time. So good thing there's a Control Z, right, undo that guy, and let's go ahead and throw in our restriction here. So curly braces, right, we want the Y's bigger than or equal to this negative 0.65 times X plus 0.75. Alright, so that'll give me just that piece, but notice it also gives me this other piece over here. It's way out there, so we're going to want to throw in another restriction as well. So I want only that, and I also want my Y's, let's say less than, this number right here is about 4.95, so less than 5, right? So you could even say less than 6 if you wanted, just somewhere in the middle. So Y is less than or equal to 6, right? We now restrict it to just this side of the hyperbola and not that other side that is out there. So that's what I'll go ahead and keep for that particular line right there. And I might go back in and add a little bit more of that dark part that's right there, but this is the borderline for that part of the whisker. Like I said, with shading, you can add in some more lines. So I need one here, probably one here, depending on how far out I want to go to shade. Maybe something else over here in this region. But that's kind of the idea behind these hyperbolas, is that you can always throw in those lines, throw in more restrictions, right, for the shading for these as well. So if I go ahead and put in, let's say, just these that we've already put in, so Y greater than or equal to this negative 0.65x plus 0.75, right, that'll now restrict it to just above that diagonal. And then I can add in a few more, right? Maybe this line where that whisker is, I'll put in. Maybe this one over here I'll put in. And just combo those until I get it shaded in the right vicinity. So I might experiment with that a little bit more. We'll come back and take a look. All right, we're back with a few equations that I used as restrictions on these guys. So we have the one that we started with, kind of this orange one, going right through here to block off the edge going off the face. So that was the negative 0.65x plus 0.75. So I might want to make sure we're greater than that. I also threw in this red one right here at this left kind of edge of the whisker. We want the Y to be 0.9x plus 9.15 for that line. And we want to make sure Y's are smaller than that, so that's included in that shaded area. The Y is 0.75x plus 6.1. That was this blue line on the edge of this other whisker here. And then I just put in kind of an arbitrary one here that may adjust later in the future, but it'll definitely overlap with kind of this big region right in here while I decide how I want to shade that. But for now, we can go ahead and just throw in this other restriction of negative 1.5x plus 1.5. So I have all four of those kind of listed, 1, 2, 3, 4 in a row, with the Y's either greater or less than, whichever applies for those. So and that'll shade in that region right there. I'm going to go ahead and change that now to one of my colors that I've defined. So we defined the fur before. It's kind of yellowish, creamish color right there, and make that fill 1 instead of 0.4. And now I got the shading done just for that piece. Remember this line right here. So if I click off of the shading now, that line will be on top of the fur because of that. And then I can go through and can delete all these other lines that are around it before I go through for the next time. So I'll go ahead and delete those before I go on to any of the other parts that are around here. That way I don't have them cluttering up my space. So anyway, that is how you can use hyperbolas, right? It's any of these kind of U or V type shapes. Usually if it's a really sharp corner, then I might do that with just like two different lines that's in there. But if it does have kind of a rounded corner, sometimes I'll use these hyperbolas. So anyway, hope that was helpful, and we'll see you on the next video.